When I first saw the announcement trailer for Maquette, I was instantly intrigued. I really love puzzle games, especially ones that have a unique way of implementing puzzles into the world that make you understand their rules, with those rules changing to keep the game being fresh and, well, puzzling. Some of the best examples of these are Portal, The Witness, the Rooms series, and The Return of the Obra Dinn. Each one of these games has a totally unique approach to solving their many puzzles, and that makes them not only replayable but memorable too. Maquette promised to provide a similar thing in that the game uses a recursive world to make things that you interact with grow and shrink in size depending on which level of the dome you're in, including your own character, which is such a unique and exciting way of creating and solving puzzles. So this had to be the perfect game for me, right? Well, unfortunately, for everything the game does right, the potential it so majestically teases us with is a royally squandered opportunity to make one of the finest puzzle games of all time. As I mentioned, the game does quite a few things right, in fact better than right, almost perfectly. The first of these, which is instantly notable, is the art design. I played Maquette on a PS5 on a 4K HDR monitor, and the colours and level design felt like they were about to burst out of the screen at me. Everything is so strongly saturated and clearly handcrafted that it invites the player in the first few minutes of the game. As you progress through the game, the world shifts physically and tonally to match what is happening in the story. One minute you're exploring a beautiful, brightly lit fairground, the next a dark and drab village that is more reminiscent of a graveyard than a place where people live. The closest game I would have to compare it to visually would have to be The Witness, as they both share very colourful palettes and very similar looking textures, but that's about as far as this comparison goes. In fact, if I had to compare the game, I would have to say it's more like if The Witness and Gone Home had a baby. The game is bright and colourful, and yes, technically a puzzle game, but the themes and tones of the story are much closer in parallel with Gone Home, with the story taking much more of the focus in the game than the actual puzzles themselves, which I think is quite a shame. On top of the beautiful art direction is the fantastic use of sound. Although there isn't a huge array of sounds, the ones that are there are used effectively and work to help make what's happening around you feel like they're having real impact. Two great examples of this is when you take an item like a key and place a bigger version inside the smaller maquette, which spawns a giant one in the level you're currently in and lands with a thud and a ringing sound, and also when you take a step outside of the medium-sized dome and into the giant version of the dome. The sound design becomes much deeper and creates a vast emptiness to emphasize the expanse of that dome. There are also many other examples of fantastic sound design to clue you into how to proceed, like hearing this generator behind the wall that you can't climb over, and so if you go to the smaller dome you can turn it off that way and get past the wall, and so many other examples that would take a long time to discuss. There is also a brilliant soundtrack featured in the game that hits you right from the very beginning and is then sprinkled throughout the subsequent levels, each song having its own tone and story to tell within the game. As much as I love the songs themselves, I did however find them quite suddenly and almost obnoxiously placed. As I entered a level, I would then have this very loud and long song playing over everything else while I'm trying to think of what to do. Maybe if the music had been quieter by default it would have worked much better, but as the default level I had it on was very distracting. Going back to the story, it may be the intention for the game to have more of a focus on the story than the puzzles, and that's absolutely fine, I don't have an issue with that in theory. However, when it's not also backed up by the mechanics that it so generously advertised, it simply disappoints. The reason that Gone Home works so much better in my opinion is because the story is always the central focus of the game and the gameplay is there to facilitate the telling of that story. In Maquette, the gameplay is the thing that is the most exciting thing about it and the main reason to want to play. Another way Maquette is like Gone Home is its length. I downloaded the game on release and after 3 to 4 hours of playtime I had already beaten the game with just a few extra missing trophies for speedrunning the levels, but I'll talk more about that in a moment. I have to say I did actually really like the story that was being told and was instantly made to care about and believe in the characters, which is reinforced by the incredible voice acting by Bryce Dallas Howard and Seth Gable, who I came to realise are actually a real life couple. And I think this was a very smart move by development studio Graceful Decay, as there were moments where I really honestly believed they were a real couple because of how they sound together in the game. And knowing that they are a real life couple makes so much sense and I have to applaud them for that decision. The story is fed to us in bite-sized chunks by the solutions to the puzzles. For example, you might use a key to open a door and then will be greeted by dialogue or text to explain where the characters are and what they're doing. It does become quite melancholic after a couple of hours of playing, which really broke my heart, but I still felt invested in the characters and rooted for them because of what I had already experienced. However, the game then rushes towards its conclusion even after it has tricked me into thinking it would be a much longer game by switching up the rules and the setup of its puzzles. I was excited when it did this because I love being challenged in new ways, always having to second guess what the game is asking me to do and to come up with my own answers. The core puzzle design is such a perfect springboard for making an incredibly deep and perplexing game and to allow the player to have some proper eureka moments by giving them the freedom and creativity to get satisfaction from solving the puzzles. However, this isn't anywhere near as deep or interesting as I would have hoped for, and a lot of that disappointment comes from the unexpectedly short runtime. The puzzles are so individualised and short that when I understood what was available to me in the level, it didn't take much working out at all to figure out what I had to do. There were moments when I was stuck on a puzzle and tried to cheese it before realising that there was a simple solution staring me in the face, which at the time made me feel really good when I solved it legitimately. But then realised that it wasn't really actually a puzzle at all, it was just that the game had set up a false expectation on my part, and so I spent a decent chunk of time trying to understand what it wanted from me. This may be more of a me problem, but realising how easy the solve actually is never fun or fulfilling feeling. When the game did change up the formula, this is when I thought there would surely be much more to come, but these just feel like deleted scenes that had been tossed back into the game just to add an extra hour of gameplay before being sent back to the dome and finishing the game. Like I say, the implementation of this recursive world is actually very well accomplished, it just isn't allowed to shine as much as I would expect. I had asked my partner for Maquette for my birthday because it looks so beautiful and the gameplay sounded like it would be one of the most interesting puzzle games I'd ever played. I was then surprised, quite happily I'll add, to hear that it was one of March's free PS Plus games, and thank goodness it was. For everything I love about the game, like the art direction, the story, the performances, the world, the puzzle concept, I can't help but feel very disappointed by not only how shallowly they are implemented, but by their scarcity, making a short game even shorter by not extending the time with puzzles that take many multiple steps to complete. As I mentioned already, once you know what is available to you in a level, the solve is only a mental stone's throw to figure out. The game even blocks off areas from you to indicate there is no need to go to that area, or that it's not needed until later. Yes, this saves time by not having you waste it by walking around aimlessly, but there aren't even anything in these areas to interact with that might make you think that you need to do something else to complete it. It's mostly just a course of, here's a key, use the key, take the key, use it as something else, take another key, use that key, then make the key smaller and use that key to get another key to unlock the final key before using that key to make a smaller key to then unlock a small door. If you love a light puzzle game and a believable love story, then this is definitely a game for you. But if you're expecting The Witness with a recursive world, then you may well be disappointed, as there simply isn't enough to get your teeth into, and unfortunately that's where the game falls down. Let me know what your thoughts on the game are in the comments, as I imagine this will be quite a divisive game and would love to know what other people think about it as a whole. And for future reviews, critiques and gaming discussion content, then make sure to subscribe. Thank you very much for watching and take care.